This is an Access review. We won't be actually getting in Access and doing the queries for this review. We'll be talking through some of them. If you do have issues with any of these queries, you don't remember how to do them, or you need to practice them more, you can review back or refer back to the page numbers that are on the slides, as well as the videos that are referenced on the slide that would review them in more detail. So this is a PowerPoint presentation, so I'm going to go ahead and I am going to open up the PowerPoint and begin the slideshow. So this is an exam to get you a review to get you ready for both the SAM exam and the CASE exam, and also has a brief discussion of the final exams for K201. So the first exam you're going to be taking is your Access SAM exam. You want to remember to do the Access training for that. That's the best way to prepare. When you're taking the SAM exams, you want to remember to read the questions carefully. And remember that some of your buttons show up compressed on the ribbon compared to what you might be used to seeing them. And the best way to take your SAM exam is to maximize the window that is you're taking the exam in, to make sure that as few things are compressed as possible on your ribbon. Also, make sure you take the time to read the hints and the tips that appear as you hover over items or open up dialog boxes, because they may be helpful if they are there, but some of them that you are used to seeing, such as the ability to access the help windows, will not be available in SAM. You'll be able to review the differences that you see in SAM when you're doing the training. Some questions require multiple steps. It's not going to be marked correct until you do all of those steps. So if it tells you to enter something and save it, you need to click Save in order to finish that question. If it tells you to create a query and run it, you need to make sure that you run the query. You don't just create it. Make sure you know the views by looking at the view that you are in. If you click on the View button to change views when it was not necessary, it will mark it wrong, and you will use one of your attempts by simply clicking the View button. You do get 5 tries on this exam for each question. The second exam that you're going to have to take is your Access CASE exam. In this exam, you do need to know the following information. You need to know all of the queries. That is probably close to 80% of your CASE exam. So make sure you review all of the queries that we have done in class. This slide gives you all the different query names, and as we go through them, I have referenced the textbook pages where they are covered, as well as the videos that have the specific queries that you're looking at. All of the query slides are going to ask you how to create it. The answer to that is either going to be using query design or a query wizard. They're also going to ask you if there are any criteria, how you enter the criteria, and it's going to give you an example of that. You'll notice it also tells you the module and page numbers where it's covered, as well as the video that covers that information. So this particular query, the simple query, is a wizard. If you will memorize the 4 names of the wizard before you walk in to take your exams, it will help you a lot. You will probably see the wizards on your SAM exam instead of on your CASE exam, but between the 2 exams you should expect to see every query that is listed in this PowerPoint. With this first one, there was no criteria. We were just simply looking at a smaller set of fields rather than the entire table. The exact match query we covered in Module 3. This is not one of the wizards, so it is going to begin in query design. And you enter the exact text that you want matched in the criteria line in the column of the field. So if it is a text field such as city, you would put the name of the city in quotes. So an example would be Holland. Not an exact match, again, is in Module 3. We're still doing the same exact match. You can put the word not in front of it, or you can use the two symbols greater than and less than next to each other, which means is not equal to. We can use logical comparisons. We have not equal to, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, or equal to. Again, this is a query design. We use the comparison operator followed by the values. And for example, greater than or equal to 25,000. You want to remember on these, you do not want to type number formatting with your numbers. So you would not put the commas in here. And if the question was written as if it were dollars, as in $25,000, you would not include the dollar signs or the commas. Read the questions carefully. Make sure you put the sign in the correct direction. So always look at your results of your queries to make sure that the answers make sense. If you're supposed to be getting all of the numbers that are greater than or equal to 25,000, and you run your query, and all of the numbers are smaller than 25,000, then you know you have done the sign in your criteria backwards. And so those are easy mistakes that you can fix if you just take the time to run the query and look at the results. If we have multiple queries combining in an AND, that was covered in Module 3. Again, it's query design. If both criteria are on the same row, either the criteria row or the OR row, if they are both on the same row, they are going to be combined in an AND combination. So if I wanted greater than or equal to 25,000 and Lansing, I would put greater than equal to 25,000 in the amount column, and I would put Lansing in the city column, and they both need to be on the same line on that criteria row. If I want an OR combination, one criteria will go on the OR row and one will go on the criteria row. So again, it's query design. One will go on the criteria line, one will go on the OR line. Again, you must put each criteria under the column for the field that it pertains to. So if I'm working with greater than or equal to 25,000 for the amount, that could be on the criteria row, and then Lansing under the city would go on the OR line, and it would be an OR combination. Between dates is talked about in Module 3. So you can type between one date and the other date. So it would be formatted like that. Before dates are less than a date. After or on or after. After is greater than, on or after is greater than or equal to. If we had a calculated field using simple math, this was also covered in Module 3. You want on the calculated field, in the field row, the name of the new field with a colon, and then you need the formula. The formula is going to be, if there are field names in it, they will be in square brackets. And for a simple math, you're probably going to be taking a field, multiplying by a value, or maybe taking two fields and dividing them, something of that nature. Aggregate functions using queries. This is covered on Module 3. This is a very frequently missed question on the exam, so you want to make sure you review this. In query design, you need to add the total row. Once you add the total row, you do not want to try to type in a bunch of formulas. Click where it says group by and choose the various function that you want to do. A sum, an average, a minimum, whatever the criteria are. If you're grouping by, you'll also add one field that allows you to group by. And so if I wanted the minimum amount and I wanted to see the minimum for each city, I would have the amount field. Underneath that, the aggregate function would say minimum. And then I would have a city field that would say group by in the total row. When you do your first aggregate function, if you don't have a field on there that says group by, you should have one row in your answer. Once you group by it, you would have one row for every option in that group by field. So if I was grouping by city and there were 20 cities in my database, then I would have 20 rows, one for each city. I strongly encourage you to review these last two queries before you sit down for your case exam. Now we're moving into our advanced queries, which were in Module 5. So the first one is a pattern match. We're looking for a pattern. It has to begin with the word like. It has to combine the text and a wildcard after the word like, and that needs to be in quotes. I remember that it begins with like because I like to think of it as it looks like the pattern. So it's a pattern match because it looks like the pattern. There's an example of it begins with 616 and anything can follow it. When we're talking about a pattern match query, we need to remember our wildcards. So we have the asterisk, the question mark, and the hashtag or pound symbol. The asterisk means that it can be any string of characters in that spot, numbers or letters, and it doesn't matter how many. The question mark means any single character, a number or a letter. And the hashtag or pound symbol means any single digit, numbers only. We also have to be concerned about the placement of the wildcard. So in this example, if the records that were listed above had those 6 values in there, if I chose to place my asterisk in front of grand, that means it ends in grand. Therefore, West Grand would be the only one selected. If I did it the asterisk after the word grand, that means that it has to begin with Grand, so it has to be the first thing I see. So I would get Grand Haven, Grand Ledge, and Grand Rapids, because it has to start with Grand. If I use two asterisks and I place one on each side of the word Grand, that means Grand can be anywhere in that field. So therefore, I would get all 6 because Grand can be anywhere in the field. So when we deal with our pattern matches, we have to make sure we are using a wildcard. We have to make sure that our wildcards are placed correctly. Next, we have the list of values, which were also covered in Module 5. Our list of values allows us to have, in query design, more than 2 options. So they're going to begin with the word in. I like to try to remember this because I say it's in the list. So in the list, it must begin with the word in. The values are going to be separated by commas, and they're going to be enclosed in parentheses. If they are text values, they must be in quotes, but numeric values should not be in quotes. If it's not in a list, you just simply put the word not in front of it. So it is not in the list. It begins with not in. When we're combining and or criteria, it's important to read the questions carefully. There is another video that goes over several examples of combining and or criteria in different ways based on how the question is worded. This is done in query design. Sometimes you could use a list of values. Sometimes you could use the and row and the or row. It just depends on the example. In this particular example, you can see that 1 and 2 would be selected if I combined it this way on the top. No records would be selected if I did it this way. The reason for that is it does the combinations on the same row first. So here, since everything is on the same row, it says if it's France or Italy, that's going to give me 1, 2, and 4. But then it says and it has to be 1700 or 2000, so that eliminates 4, which gives us 1 and 2. In this example, it's going to give us first, France and 1700, there are none of those. Or Italy and 2000, there are none of those. So we get none. And if we look at the way that this question is worded, then the bottom one, then the top one would be accurate. The thing you want to remember is it's not saying that it's always going to be this top one, because depending on the wording of the question, the bottom one could be correct. So you have to read the questions very carefully, and you have to try to group your criteria in the and ors the way the question states them. If you want more examples of these, please refer back to the prior video from Module 5. Additional 1. We did a calculated field in Module 5. This is, again, in the field row in criteria, in the field row in query design. On the field row, you need the name of the new field, followed by a colon, and then the formula. We used an immediate if, which is very similar to an Excel if statement in that it has an expression, a true part, and a false part. We used is null to see if something was blank. And we combined things together using concatenating, which is the ampersand symbol. The next query we did were parameter queries. If you will remember, the parameter query popped up a question for you to answer. That question's answer that you typed in became the criteria. So parameter queries are done in query design, and they must be entered on the criteria row in the field that they pertain to. Do not use the parameter button on the ribbon. That only allows you to specify the type of data that a person can answer with that box. You must put your prompting question inside square brackets on the criteria row in the field in question. So for example, you could say enter the country. You would have that in the country field, and then they would type in a country and the results would be filtered to whatever they typed in as their answer. If I wanted to return all of the records if I left it blank, I had to add that and make it a pattern match query. So it began with the word like, had my prompting question, and then I combined or concatenated with the ampersand symbol and added a wildcard. And since the wildcard is text, you need to put it in quotes. If you wanted to use a minimum parameter for an amount field, you could put your logical expression in front of the prompting question. So you could say greater than or equal to, and you would have the prompting question. It would then take whatever number they typed in as the answer, and it would be greater than or equal to that amount. Crosstab query was the next one that we covered. Make sure you remember how to change your column headings. You can review that in the pages of the text as well as the video. This is one of our wizards. So as you're going through the wizard, look carefully for the prompts. Make sure you watch the sample box as it's being built in front of you. And one final tip on wizards is to remember that you never hit finish if next is still an option. Always choose next so that you make sure you answer all of the questions correctly as you're going through the wizard. You will probably see wizards on your SAM exam, and if you click finish too soon, it will definitely mark it wrong because there are still questions that you had not answered since you didn't look at the rest of the screens. So make sure you click next as long as next is an option. Find duplicates is another wizard. Make sure when you're creating your find duplicates that the question that asks you what fields can contain duplicate information, you never want to enter the primary key. The primary key by definition has to be unique. If you enter that on the first slide that asks you to enter which fields to look for duplicates in, you will never get a response because Access will not allow you to add duplicate records in that particular field. On the second screen, when it asks you what other pieces of information to display, you can display any field you want, including the primary key. So make sure you pay careful attention to that. Finding Unmatched is another and our final wizard. Make sure when you're pointing out which fields to match between the two queries or the queries and tables that you click on the field in the other object, and then click this center button. And then we had our top value queries. So with a top value query, you are going to use the return box to specify how many records to return. However, you must sort these records in descending order, and it must be done in the design view so that it is sorting prior to the records being selected. It needs to have the highest values at the top so that when it goes to select the top 5 or the top 10, it sees the highest values at the top first. So you must sort in design view in descending order. Then you're going to go up to the return box and enter either a percentage or a quantity. And remember, if the specific percentage or quantity is not in the drop-down list, you can type in the values you want. That covers all of our queries. There are a few additional things that you should know. You need to know how to create a form or a report in design view. That is covered in modules 6 and 7 and is going to be in video module part 1. So if you need to review that, go ahead and look in those locations. Remember, we have 2 types of validation rules, and validation rules are going to be on your case exam and may also be on your SAM exam. Field validation rules look at one field. They are entered in the field properties after you click on that field in the top part of the pane. You're going to then go down to the field properties at the bottom to enter your rule and the text for the rule. The validation text is the error message that will appear if the rule is violated. When you go to test your field validation rules, it will test the data immediately upon trying to leave that field. In comparison, we have table validation rules. These are the rules that compare 2 fields within the table. So if you're looking at 2 fields, it is a validation rule. It must be in the table properties that you open up using the property sheet button on your ribbon. It will open on the right-hand side of your screen. You will enter the rule there as well as the text for if it's violated. In table validation rules, any field names must be in square brackets and they must be included in the rule. When you go to test a table validation rule, it will not test until you go to leave the record. So if it's the first 2 fields and you've got 15 other fields, until you try to go to the next record, it will not run your test to see if it's valid or not. So you need to make sure you try to change fields, or records, excuse me. Module 5, video 15 covers validation rules. You should make sure you understand table relationships, referential integrity, cascading updates, and cascading deletes. This was covered in Module 2 and is in video part 5. For your SAM exam, you need to make sure you know how to do some basic file maintenance, such as compact and repair and backup. I do want to reiterate, when you're trying to take your SAM exam, you need to know which view you're in by looking at it, and you need to be able to know what view you need to be in to do certain things. So pay attention to those details as you're practicing these skills. As far as the queries are concerned, please practice those queries. Your participation activities that were handed out, there is a, in some classes the participation activities were handed out. Other classes got them as an option for a review set that you could do. Practice those. They go through the skills that you need. When you're taking your case exam, please read the questions carefully. Make sure you pick up on whether things say greater than or whether they say greater than or equal to. Those are very specific details that will affect your results. You need to know how to enter all of your fields in one step in a query. That will help you as far as time is concerned. If you are given specific fields to add, only add those that you are given. If you are told to include all of the fields in the table, go ahead and add them all at once. But if you are given a specific list, add only those fields, and they must be in the order specified or you will lose on the exam. Make sure your questions are exact. Pay attention to whether it's greater than or equal to. Watch for typing errors. You do not want to spend a lot of time trying to get all your queries right and then lose a bunch of points because you had typing errors in a lot of the query names. So please watch out for typing errors. Make sure you are typing your names and all the other information exactly as it is given to you in the exam. Know all the queries and the other information from the PowerPoint and the study guide. And I can't stress enough to practice your queries because probably close to 80% of your grade on the case exam is queries. For the final exam, there are going to be reviews to help you. Make sure you do those. They are not for points, but they will help you get ready for that exam. For the final exam, again, read carefully. I like to look first at the color of the ribbon. It's going to shuffle your questions. So you're not going to get all of the Access questions and then all of the Excel questions. It's going to intermingle them. If you look at your ribbon, Access has a red tab, a red ribbon. Excel has green. If you look at the color first, it will help you as you read the questions. Some of the terms are used in both places. For example, validation rules were covered in Excel and Access. So if you're reading a question about a validation rule and in your mind you're in Excel, and then you get done and you look at the problem, you realize now you're in Access, you have to rethink that answer. So make sure the first thing I do when I take these final exams is I look first at the color of the ribbon so I know what software I'm in, then I read the question. Remember that some things may be compressed more and some hints may not be visible when you're in the simulated version of the software. Some questions will require multiple steps. And again, I would encourage you to make sure you know whether you are in Access or Excel even before you start reading the question. I think it will help you. In the management information system questions that will be multiple choice, you obviously will get one try. But in the Access and Excel questions, you will get 5 tries per question, the same way you did the SAM exam for those software products. I wish you the best of luck as we conclude this semester. And make sure you review all of the information in those PowerPoints. And if there are queries you were unclear of, go back to the text and the other videos and review them, or go see the tutors or your instructor. And that concludes this review.